The CEO was still on the call when he overheard her innocent confession. Everything changed. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. He should have hung up. The call had already gone on too long, the kind of bored discussion that drained the room and left everyone pretending not to check the time. He listened in silence, fingers resting on the polished edge of his desk, eyes fixed on the skyline beyond the glass. 30 floors below, traffic crawled like a vein of light. He was still on the line when the voices shifted, when the formal tone loosened, when someone on the other end assumed privacy had returned. That was when he heard her. Not a speech, not a plea. A simple, unguarded sentence that slipped out the way truths do when no one is supposed to be listening. She spoke softly, almost embarrassed by her own honesty, as if she were confessing to the air rather than to another human being. She said it once, quietly, and then laughed in that nervous way people laugh when they are trying to make something small. The room went very still. He did not interrupt. He did not clear his throat. He did not announce that the call was still open. He just listened, heart slowing, then tightening as the meaning settled in. It was not the words themselves that struck him. It was what they revealed, a kind of innocence that did not advertise itself, a life lived carefully, a boundary she had protected without ever asking for applause. The silence on the line stretched. Someone changed the subject, papers shuffled, the meeting lurched forward. But for him, time had already split into before and after. He ended the call a few minutes later, with the same calm authority he always used. "Thank you. We will follow up. Talk soon." The screen went dark. The office felt larger, emptier. He leaned back in his chair, jaw set, replaying her voice in his mind. He told himself it meant nothing. He told himself it was none of his business. He told himself to return to work. Instead, he stood and walked to the window. Her name appeared in his thoughts the way a spark appears in dry air. Not because she had tried to impress him, not because she had offered anything, but because she had not. In a world where everyone sold something, she had simply spoken the truth, unaware of the power listening on the other side. By the next morning, he had already learned more than he should have. Her file was thin, temporary contract, clean record, no favors owed, a life balanced on deadlines and rent, and quiet determination. She was not looking for rescue. She was looking for stability. That was when the idea formed. Logical on the surface, strategic, beneficial to both sides. He needed a solution for his own problem, one that required appearances, timing, and absolute discretion. She needed security, a bridge, a way through the narrow space she was trapped in. He told himself it would be simple, a contract, clear terms, no emotions, no confusion. He would present it as an offer, nothing more. She would be free to refuse. Still, as he reached for his phone, he paused, because somewhere beneath the calculations, beneath the polished reasoning, something else had taken root. Not desire, not control. Curiosity mixed with a strange sense of responsibility. He had heard something private, something fragile, and now that knowledge sat between them, invisible but undeniable. He dialed her number. When she answered, her voice was steady, professional, unaware that the moment she had tried to forget had already changed the direction of both their lives. He did not mention the call. That was the first thing she noticed. She sat across from him in the quiet conference room, hands folded carefully in her lap, posture straight in a way that came from years of needing to look composed, even when she did not feel that way. The glass walls muted the noise of the office outside. Morning light filtered in, clean and unforgiving. This was not a place for personal conversations. And yet, he had asked for this meeting himself. He began with facts. He spoke about timing, about public perception, about a situation that required stability and discretion. His voice was calm, measured, the same voice she had heard on calls and briefings. If anyone else had been listening, they would have assumed this was just another business discussion. She listened without interrupting, eyes steady, waiting for the real reason. Then he said it. He needed someone to stand beside him, not as an employee, not as an assistant, but as a partner in name only. A contractual arrangement, temporary, clearly defined, mutually beneficial. She blinked once, certain she had misunderstood. He continued, laying out the structure as if he were presenting a merger. Public appearances, a shared narrative, no intimacy required, no emotional obligations. Everything documented, everything transparent. In return, he would offer what she needed most right now: financial security, legal protection, time. She felt the room tilt, just slightly. This was not why she had come here. She had expected a correction, a reassignment, perhaps even a termination. Not this. Never this. She asked him why. It was a simple question, but it landed between them with weight. He did not answer right away. When he did, he chose his words carefully. He said she was reliable. He said she had integrity. He said she was not connected to anyone who would complicate matters. All of it was true. None of it felt complete. She looked down at the folder he had placed on the table. The contract was thick, detailed, written in precise language that left little room for interpretation. Her name was already printed on the first page. Seeing it there made her chest tighten. She told him she was not for sale. He nodded, as if he had expected that response. He told her this was not a purchase. It was a choice, one she was free to refuse. He made that part very clear. No retaliation, no consequences. She would walk out exactly as she had walked in. The honesty disarmed her more than pressure would have. She asked for time. He agreed immediately. 24 hours. No more, no less. He slid the folder toward her, then leaned back, giving her space as if the decision truly rested in her hands. She took the contract home that night and did not open it. Instead, she sat on the edge of her bed in her small apartment, staring at the wall where a crack ran from the ceiling down to the corner of the window. She thought about overdue notices, about the call she had received that morning from her landlord, about how tired she was of choosing between dignity and survival. The next morning she returned. Her hands trembled when she signed, but her signature was steady. When she slid the contract back across the table, he did not smile. He simply nodded, as if acknowledging the gravity of what they had just set in motion. They reviewed the rules together. No romantic claims beyond what was necessary in public. No interference in each other's private lives. No assumptions. If either of them wanted out, the agreement ended. Immediately. She asked him to add one condition of her own. Honesty. If this was going to work, she would not be lied to. Not about the arrangement, not about its end. He agreed without hesitation. When the meeting ended, they stood at the same time, two people bound by ink rather than feeling. As she reached the door, he spoke her name, stopping her just long enough to meet her eyes. He told her he would protect her reputation as fiercely as his own. She nodded, unsure whether that promise comforted her or frightened her. Neither of them said what they were both thinking. That everything had already begun the moment he chose not to hang up. The first public appearance happened sooner than she expected. 3 days after the contract was signed, a black sedan waited for her outside her apartment building just after sunrise. She stood on the sidewalk with a single bag at her feet, coat pulled tight, heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. She had read the schedule twice the night before. Charity breakfast, brief remarks, photographs. Nothing complicated. And yet, as the car door opened, it felt like stepping into a life that did not belong to her. He was already inside when she slid into the seat. No greeting card smile, no practiced charm, just a brief nod and a quiet good morning. The space between them was deliberate, respectful, almost formal. She noticed that first. He was careful not to touch her, not even by accident. That should have made things easier. It did not. At the venue, everything moved quickly. Assistants, security, people who seemed to know exactly where to stand and when to move. She stayed close to him, as instructed, matching his pace, learning the rhythm of his world, step by step. When he introduced her, he did not exaggerate. He said her name clearly. He said she was with him. Nothing more, nothing less. Cameras flashed. Questions floated past them like static. She smiled when she was supposed to smile. She listened when she was supposed to listen. When someone reached out to shake her hand, he waited, watching, ready to intervene but never interrupting. It was subtle, protective, without being possessive. She told herself she was imagining it. Afterward, in the quiet of the car, she finally exhaled. She had not realized how tense she had been until the moment passed. He glanced at her then, just once, and said she had done well, not as praise, as acknowledgement. That night, she lay awake, replaying every second. The way people looked at her, the way doors opened without question, the way her name suddenly carried weight simply because it followed his. It unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. Over the next week, the pattern repeated. Appearances, dinners, short trips. Each time, the rules held. No intimacy, no private questions, no blurred lines. And yet, in the spaces between events, something quieter began to form. He noticed details, the way she always checked the exits when she entered a room, the way she flinched at raised voices, the way she relaxed only when she thought no one was watching. He adjusted without comment, chose quieter tables, shortened conversations, made room for her to breathe. One evening, after a long day, they rode up to the top floor in silence. The elevator hummed softly. She leaned against the wall, exhaustion etched into her face. Without looking at her, he loosened his tie and said she could skip the next appearance if she wanted. She was surprised. The contract did not require that kindness. She told him she would be fine. He did not argue. He simply accepted her answer, as if trusting that she meant it. Later that night, they found themselves alone in the kitchen of his penthouse. The city spread out beyond the windows. She poured herself a glass of water. He poured one as well, mirroring her without realizing it. The moment felt strangely ordinary. She asked him why he never crossed the lines so many people expected him to cross. He thought for a long moment before answering. He said power only meant something if you chose not to use it. The words stayed with her. As she returned to the guest room that night, she realized something had shifted. The arrangement was still fake. The rules were still intact. But the distance between them no longer felt like a wall. It felt like a choice they were both making, every single day. The first real test came at a formal dinner he could not avoid. It was not a charity event or a quiet appearance with controlled press. This was a private gathering, hosted by members of the board, people who had known him long before the headlines did, people who believed they understood his life, his weaknesses, and his patterns. Bringing her into that room was not written anywhere in the contract, but he insisted she attend. She agreed, even though something in her chest tightened the moment she saw the guest list. The house was old money elegant, all dark wood and soft lighting. Conversations were low and sharp at the same time, layered with meaning. She stayed close to him as they entered, feeling eyes follow them. Curiosity first, then assessment. Introductions moved quickly, polite smiles, careful questions. She answered when spoken to, keeping her voice calm, her posture steady. She could feel the weight of being evaluated, not as a person, but as an addition to him. Then she saw the woman across the table. Tall, impeccably dressed, familiar with the room in a way that came from belonging. The woman smiled when their eyes met, slow and deliberate, before turning her attention fully to him. The shift was immediate, the conversation sharpened. Old stories resurfaced, subtle reminders of shared history. The woman spoke as if she still had a claim, as if this arrangement were temporary and everyone knew it. She did not look away. She did not interrupt. She simply listened. When the woman finally turned to her and asked how they had met, the table went quiet. It was the kind of silence that waited for a mistake. She felt his attention settle on her, not as pressure, but as trust. She answered honestly, without revealing anything that was not hers to reveal. She spoke about timing, about respect, about choosing to stand beside someone not because of status, but because of intention. Her voice did not waver. She did not oversell. She did not retreat. The woman smiled again, thinner this time. Later, as dinner continued, the questions turned sharper. Someone mentioned contracts. Someone joked about arrangements. Someone suggested that everything in that room could be negotiated. That was when he spoke, not loudly, not defensively. He placed his hand on the table, palm open, grounding the moment. He said she was there because he wanted her there. He said he would not tolerate speculation about her motives or her worth. He did not explain further. It was enough. On the drive home, neither of them spoke for several minutes. The city lights blurred past the windows. Finally, she broke the silence. She asked him who the woman was. He answered truthfully, a past he had outgrown, a connection that no longer held power over him. She nodded, absorbing the information without judgment. She told him she did not like being used as a test. He apologized, immediately, without justification. That surprised her more than the dinner had. Back at the penthouse, she paused before heading to the guest room. She told him she needed one thing clarified. If this arrangement ever turned into a battleground between him and his past, she would leave. No negotiations. He met her gaze and agreed. That night, as she lay awake, she realized something else had shifted. The world around them was beginning to push back, and for the first time, he was choosing her side without being asked. The contract had not required that, but he did it anyway. The first crack appeared when the arrangement began to feel normal. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of their lives settled into something dangerously comfortable. She learned his schedule without trying to. Early mornings, late nights, long stretches of silence, followed by sudden intensity. He learned hers just as quietly, the way she needed time alone after events, the way she kept her phone face down, as if protecting herself from bad news. They were careful, still careful, but the care itself had changed. One evening, after returning from a short trip, she found him already in the kitchen when she arrived home. His jacket was draped over the back of a chair, his sleeves were rolled up. The scene felt intimate in a way the contract had never accounted for. She stopped short, unsure whether to step forward or turn away. He looked up and said her name, not as a greeting, but as acknowledgement. She nodded, suddenly aware of how quiet the penthouse felt. No assistance, no schedule, just the hum of the city outside. She poured herself a glass of water, hands steady out of habit rather than calm. He watched her for a moment, then spoke. He told her the board was not satisfied. They were pushing for permanence, for clarity, for assurances that what they presented to the public was not temporary. He did not disguise the pressure. He did not soften it. She felt her chest tighten. This was not what they had agreed to. She reminded him of the contract, the exit clause, the promise that if either of them wanted out, it would end without consequence. She said it evenly, but there was something in her voice that betrayed her, a quiet fear she had not named yet. He listened, fully. When she finished, he nodded. He said he would not force her into anything she had not chosen. Not now, not ever. That should have been the end of the conversation. Instead, she asked him a question she had been carrying for days. She asked him if this was still business. The answer took longer than it should have. He admitted that it had stopped being simple. He said he found himself thinking about her when she was not there, wondering if she was comfortable, if she was safe, if she was happy. He did not frame it as desire. He framed it as concern. But they both understood the difference had begun to blur. She felt the truth of it settle between them, heavy and unavoidably real. She told him that concern could become a cage if it was not handled carefully. He agreed. Later that night, she lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. The contract sat in her bag, untouched for days. She thought about the life she had stepped into, the security, the doors that opened, the protection he offered without being asked. And she thought about the cost. The next morning, everything shifted. An article broke before breakfast, anonymous sources, speculation, questions about her background, her intentions, her past. The word arrangement appeared more than once, wrapped in implication rather than fact. By the time she reached the kitchen, he was already on the phone, voice tight with restraint. He ended the call when he saw her, anger flickering across his face before he masked it. She did not need to ask what had happened. She told him she would leave, not because she was ashamed, not because she was afraid, but because she refused to become collateral damage in a war she had not chosen. She reminded him of her condition, honesty, choice. He did not argue. That frightened her more than resistance would have. He told her he would handle it. He told her to trust him. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. This was the first time the arrangement truly felt at risk, and neither of them knew whether it would survive what came next. He did not ask her to stay. That was the hardest part. After she told him she would leave, he simply nodded, as if acknowledging a decision he had known was coming. He told her she could take as much time as she needed. He told her there would be no consequences, no retaliation, no attempts to control the narrative. His voice was steady, but something in his eyes had shifted, a tension she had not seen before. She packed quietly, not everything, just enough to remind herself that this was still temporary, that she still belonged to herself. As she zipped her bag, she paused, hand resting on the fabric, listening to the distant sounds of the city. The penthouse felt different now, less like shelter, more like a crossroads. She did not leave immediately. Instead, she spent the afternoon walking through the city alone. She needed distance, air, perspective. The headlines replayed in her mind, not as words but as implications. People questioning her motives, her worth, reducing her to a theory instead of a person. By evening, she had made her decision. She returned just as the sun dipped below the skyline. The apartment lights were dim. He was in the living room, jacket still on, phone face down on the table in front of him. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his face. She told him she was leaving in the morning, not because of the article, not because of fear, but because the arrangement had reached a point where it could no longer protect either of them. She said that staying now would blur lines that had to remain clear if anything real was going to survive. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he stood and walked to the table. From a drawer, he removed the contract, the same one she had signed weeks earlier. He held it for a moment, eyes scanning the familiar pages as if seeing them for the first time. Then he did something she did not expect. He tore it in half. Once, cleanly, then again. The sound was soft, but final. He dropped the pieces onto the table and looked at her. He said the arrangement was over, effective immediately. He said whatever happened next would not be bound by ink or obligation. He said he would face the board, the press, and the fallout on his own. She felt her breath catch. He continued, voice lower now. He admitted that he had crossed a line long before the article, not in action, but in intention. He told her that what he felt was no longer something he could hide behind logic or necessity. He told her he cared for her, not because she fit into his world, but because she had challenged it. He told her he was sorry, not for the contract, not for the offer, but for ever placing her in a position where she had to choose between safety and truth. She did not respond right away. The room felt suspended, as if waiting for her to decide what this moment would become. She looked at the torn pages on the table, at the man standing in front of her, without the shield of authority or certainty. She told him she appreciated the honesty, but she still needed to leave. She needed time to decide who she was without the protection of his name, without the noise, without the expectations. She needed to know that if she ever came back, it would be because she chose him, not because circumstances pushed her there. He accepted that without argument. The next morning, he walked her to the door. No promises, no dramatic declarations, just a quiet understanding that something important had ended, and something else might begin later, if they were both brave enough to let it. As the door closed behind her, he stood alone in the silence. For the first time, he had chosen to let go, and for the first time, it felt like the only honest move he had ever made. The backlash came faster than either of them expected. Within 48 hours of her leaving, the narrative hardened. Commentators speculated. Investors questioned judgment. The board called an emergency meeting, framing concern as responsibility, pressure as prudence. They wanted distance. They wanted reassurance. They wanted him to restore control. He sat at the long table alone, no partner beside him, no carefully curated image to soften the room, just facts, projections, and a quiet expectation that he would do what he had always done before, protect the company first. Sacrifice whatever was necessary. They presented options, statements drafted by lawyers, language that would imply misunderstanding without admitting fault, language that would quietly place the burden on her absence rather than their actions. He listened, then he closed the folder. He told them there would be no statement that questioned her integrity, no implication that she had sought advantage, no revision of history that reduced a person to a headline. He told them that if stability required dishonesty, then stability was not worth preserving. The room went silent. Someone reminded him of consequences, share price, confidence, leadership optics. Someone else suggested a replacement narrative, one that framed the entire arrangement as a misunderstanding corrected in time. He stood. He said leadership was not optics, it was accountability. He said if the company could not survive without discrediting a woman who had done nothing wrong, then the problem was not her presence, it was their values. When the meeting ended, the outcome was unclear, but the line had been drawn. That night, alone in the penthouse, he reread the articles, not for strategy, for understanding. He saw the story as she must have seen it, stripped of nuance, reduced to motive. He understood then that silence would be interpreted as agreement. The next morning, he acted. He held a press conference without warning. No prepared remarks beyond a single page, no public relations buffer. Cameras filled the room. Questions came sharp and fast. He answered calmly. He said the arrangement had been a mistake, not because it was hidden, but because it placed someone else at risk without her consent to public scrutiny. He said the contract was void. He said the relationship no longer existed. And then he said something no one expected. He took responsibility, not as an executive, as a man. He said she had been honest, professional, and undeserving of the speculation aimed at her. He said the failure was his. He said he would not correct the record by erasing her dignity. The room shifted. Some questions went unanswered. Some answers unsettled investors. But the message was clear. The line would not move again. Across the city, she watched the broadcast alone. She had not expected him to do that. Not publicly, not at that cost. She felt the familiar instinct to retreat, to protect herself from disappointment. But this time, the moment asked something different of her. He was not asking her to return. He was not invoking loyalty. He was standing still and letting the consequences land where they may. Days passed. The noise faded into background static. She returned to her routines. She took a temporary position far from his orbit. She rebuilt something small and stable, piece by piece. And yet, something remained unresolved, not as longing, but as recognition. One evening, she found an envelope slipped beneath her door. No logo, no seal. Inside was a single note, not an apology, not an explanation, just one sentence. I chose truth, even when it cost me. She sat with the note in her hands for a long time. For the first time since everything began, the choice ahead of her felt entirely her own. And she realized the story was not finished yet. She did not go back right away. That was the choice she made first. After reading the note, she folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer beside her bed. Not as a keepsake, as a marker. Proof that something real had happened, even if it never became anything more. She returned to her days, early mornings, long walks, work that asked little of her beyond consistency. The quiet helped. It reminded her who she was before the contract, before the headlines, before her name carried someone else's shadow. Still, the city felt different now. Everywhere she went, she noticed the absence. Not of him, exactly, but of the weight she had been carrying while standing beside him. For the first time in months, her choices were entirely her own. That freedom was steadier than relief. It did not rush her. It waited. 2 weeks passed. Then came the invitation. It was not formal, no embossed letterhead, no assistant coordinating schedules. Just a simple message asking if she would meet him for coffee. Neutral location, no expectations, no urgency. He made it clear that a no would be accepted without question. She stared at the message longer than she meant to. She thought about the press conference, the board meeting, the way he had stood alone in front of cameras and taken responsibility without using her as a shield. She thought about the contract torn cleanly in half, about the fact that he had not tried to replace her with another narrative when she left. In the end, she said yes. The cafe was quiet, tucked between a bookstore and a florist. Nothing about it suggested power or performance. She arrived first and chose a table near the window. When he walked in a few minutes later, there was no security detail, no phone pressed to his ear. Just a man in a dark coat, scanning the room until he saw her. He did not reach for her. He did not speak right away. He simply sat down across from her and waited, giving her the space to begin or to leave. She stayed. They talked about small things at first. The weather, the neighborhood, the coffee. He listened more than he spoke. When she finally asked how things were, he answered honestly. The company was steady. His position was intact but changed. Trust was slower now. He did not complain. She told him about her work. Temporary, quiet, enough. Then the silence shifted, no longer awkward, but intentional. He told her he was not there to ask her back into anything. Not a role, not an arrangement. He said he wanted to apologize again, not to erase what happened, but to acknowledge it fully. He said he had learned what it meant to choose without leverage. She believed him. She told him she was not ready to step into his world again. Not yet. She needed to be sure that if she ever did, it would be because she wanted him, not because she admired what he had risked. He nodded. He said he would wait, not as a promise, as a fact. When they stood to leave, there was no embrace, no dramatic farewell, just a quiet understanding that something new had been offered. Not a contract, not a performance, a possibility. That night, as she walked home alone, she realized something important had happened. The power imbalance that once defined everything between them was gone. For the first time, whatever came next would be chosen on equal ground. And that changed everything. She did not answer him right away. That was how she knew the moment mattered. After the cafe, days turned into weeks. Not with silence, but with space. Messages were brief and infrequent. No pressure, no expectations disguised as patience. He respected the distance in a way that proved he had learned something real. And she used that time to listen to herself, not to the noise around her. One evening, she found herself standing outside the small gallery where she sometimes stopped on her walks home. The lights inside were warm, familiar. Without fully deciding to, she stepped in. He was there, not waiting, not searching the room, just standing near a wall, hands in his pockets, studying a photograph with the same quiet focus she remembered from the earliest days. When he noticed her, surprise flickered across his face, followed by something softer, relief maybe, or gratitude. They walked through the space together without rushing. At the back of the gallery, he stopped. He told her he had been invited to speak at a foundation event later that night. Nothing public, no cameras, just a small group focused on rebuilding trust and supporting ethical leadership. He said he had not planned to bring anyone. He said he was there because the place reminded him of clarity. She smiled at that. They stepped outside as the evening settled around them. The city hummed, familiar and grounding. He turned to her then, finally saying what he had held back. He said he was not asking her to return to his world. He was asking if he could be part of hers. Slowly, without titles, without protection offered as leverage. He said he did not want a performance or a promise made too soon. He wanted the chance to earn something real. She felt the truth of it in the quiet between them. She told him she had been afraid that choosing him would mean losing herself again. She told him that she needed to know he would stand beside her, even when it was inconvenient, even when there was nothing to gain. He answered without hesitation. He said he already had. She reached into her bag and pulled out the folded note he had left her weeks earlier. The paper was worn now, creased from being opened and closed. She handed it back to him. She told him she had kept it because it reminded her that choice mattered more than comfort. He took it carefully. She told him she was ready to try again, not as a return, as a beginning. They did not move quickly. They walked together instead, leaving the gallery behind. No announcement followed. No headlines, just two people choosing honesty over spectacle. Months later, on a quiet evening far from boardrooms and contracts, he asked her to marry him. There was no ring at first, no speech rehearsed in advance, just a question spoken with certainty and respect. He told her he did not want a life built on deals. He wanted one built on choice, renewed every day. She said yes, not because of what he could offer, but because of who he had chosen to become. In the end, it was never the contract that changed everything. It was the moment he stayed on the call, and the moment he learned when to let go.